Today, let's talk about the Rhode Island system. We talked about it a little bit previously, um, but the Rhode Island system simplified work by Samuel Slater, hired the entire family to work, um, encouraged people to move to the cities, provide them with housing, which is a way to regain the wages back into the factory. And people came to the towns to work in these factories. Unfortunately, these towns weren't really that well organized at first. There were no regulations on pollution, so the factories could dump anything they wanted in the water. They could put anything up in the air. A lot of the apartments were very rickety, called tenements, dangerous. So these early cities were not necessarily the most pleasant and healthy place to live, but they were a place that fostered new ideas and new opportunities for people that didn't have them before. There you can see a factory. Another system was the Lowell System. Francis Cabot Lowell um, started a factory, and he hired young women to work, and these young women were women in their teens and early 20s who were not ready to marry or didn't want to marry yet, but wanted to get out of the household and have some freedom. And so this brought them that opportunity. Think of it almost being like college. They lived in dormitories, they ate in cafeterias, but instead of going to class, they did work. However, because the women were together and sharing ideas, they also learned a lot. They learned from each other. They taught each other how to read and write. And from these early Lowell mills, many great ideas came out of. And the women's rights movement, it's the start of the women's rights movement, because as these women began to teach each other how to read and write and share ideas, they start to realize that they didn't have the rights and freedoms that they deserved, and they're going to start working towards that. So many of the earliest women who were involved in the women's rights movement started out as very young women or girls in the Lowell mills, where their ideas, the seeds for their ideas were planted, and they will grow into the women's rights movement later. The workers were really abused early on. Very long days, no weekends, no very limited or no holidays, poor pay, dangerous working conditions. You couldn't complain individually because you'd get fired. So they came up with the idea that if you petitioned or complained, you would do it as a group, and that's where the idea of the trade union, the union, was born. The factory can't fire everyone at once because they need workers, and it would take a long time to retrain everyone. So workers quickly learned that if they worked together and complained together and negotiate together, they would get better working conditions. So the trade unions have been a big part of our country's history, and trade unions and unions, workers who do similar jobs working together to negotiate better contracts and better opportunities and better pay, wages, benefits, more time off, etc., better working conditions. Um, got us things that we maybe take for granted, like weekends and holidays, overtime pay. The unions are all responsible for these things. The most powerful thing the union can do is go on strike, which is where they, as a group, refuse to work until their demands are met or until the negotiations are open. This hurts the company owners because it's shutting down their work and not allowing them to sell their product and make their products. But it's kind of a waiting game, because the workers aren't getting their wages either. So it's like, who can wait longer, the workers or the company? A lot of times, when workers go on strike, they often picket, which means they have signs. They say they protest outside their factory or outside the company because they want the public to be on their side and support them. One of the earliest reformers for the working movement was Sarah G. Bagley. She grew up in the Lowell Mills, where she learned how to read and write from other women there, and she pushed for more working rights. And she actually went to the governments and said in the state of Massachusetts they reduced the workday from an unlimited amount of hours to 10 hours. I mean, of course, today we're down to 8. If you're an hourly employee, you go more than 40 hours a week, you get overtime. She'd start the process for that. So these early workers had a great impact on America. They changed America, provided for themselves, and also provided for the prosperity and growth of our country as well. And of course, unions have had a big impact, as well as the great entrepreneurs that started these early factories. So we'll build on that tomorrow. Thanks for your attention.